Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new episode of the Caster Talk here in the EHE server. Today, this episode is brought to you by a variety of really talented people, which are our amazing producer, Cynthia, a new face that I've never seen before, that he just left the chat and I cannot credit him. And this episode is brought to you by ExpressVPN, because in the dark, deadly night of going into the jungle or League of Legends or any other site for that matter, ExpressVPN is your gateway to a more safer travels in the web. Today, I'm accompanied with my really good friend and co-host in the voice chat, Magnetic, aka Danielle Magne. I should have said it backwards, but I think more people are going to feel more in line with him calling him Magnetic first, and then his real name to be forgotten for all eternity. And I, as your host, Stefano Ignazzi, aka Stefo.
Hi everybody, how are you? How are you, Steph?
How are you, man? Is everything great?
Everything is just perfect. How are you? How's your day?
Well, it was pretty cool. The highlights were done before the release, and I'm pretty excited to what we're going to see this week in the terms of games. So tell me, do we have any updates of what has happened to the teams, what you've heard from around the corners, and everything?
Okay, so talking about a little bit more of this week. We did see a couple of interesting matches. We did have, for example, on our first day, we got Cookie Crazy Camels against Haru's Harem. With the victory of Haru's Harem, they've been on a winning streak all tournament long. And then we had a matchup against Team Sen and Serenity, with Serenity pulling out victorious. Gain another point to the score. Let's remember that they weren't so lucky on their first week. They got a victory right now, putting them into a better position on the standings. But tell me, you were actually casting on some of the matches. How do you feel the matches? How do you feel the new rosters coming in?
Haru's Harem was able to have such a presence during the match. Like, they were so oppressive. They know exactly where they're moving, especially when it comes to the jungle side. They are really like the worst nightmare of whoever's going around. They keep using the thing of having versatile builds for specific characters and having really consistent picks when it comes to something like the mid lane. We also saw that the mid laner of Haru's Harem picked Master G mid against the Yasuo and consistently brush him off with his little brushy every single time he could. The match was definitely kind of once at one point, and Haru's Harem had a really hard time trying to keep up to the gigantic momentum that Haru's Harem was trying to put on top of them. And the match between Serenity and Team Sen. Team Sen had won 2 matches against Cookie Crazy Camels. We saw that they were pretty consistent, and Serenity went like full ballistic on them. Like, they wanted to grenade them as often as they could. They were like catching them in fights, having a lot of jungle presence. Like, there was such a huge emphasis from them trying to do a bunch of damage. And we're definitely going to see that on the highlights. So anything else that you want to add up, something that you saw on the sidelines, or maybe a thought that you want to give us before we jump ahead?
Well, we're just gonna jump ahead with the highlights, but I just want to know a very interesting difference we had from week 1, especially with Haru's Harem. We saw how they had a strong jungle game with their Kha'Zix that was just basically picking everybody up on the lanes. And then, just like you said, on this week, we saw how they had a turn of pace. We saw how their mid lane with that Master Yi against the Yasuo just got the upper hand out of the game. I'm pretty sure that Cookie Crazy was kind of expecting a little bit of the jungle game. They didn't expect to see the performance on
Mm-hmm.
mid, which was just like you said, it was just as outstanding. Master Yi, it's a very odd pick whenever you think about the mid lane. At the same time, he is so strong on the early game. He kind of like he can suffer a little bit when it comes to farming, but about traits, he just gives in. He has a kid that allows him to play every single matchup whenever he goes on lane. Something that you're not quite used to see because he's usually
On the
on the
jungle.
jungle. Exactly. So let's just jump right in with the highlights. I'll let you explain the highlights because well you were part of the game, and then I just want to support you up with the rest of the data.
Sure. So here we have the first draft between Cookie Crazy and Harus Harem, and we see the absolute insane pick that was Master Yi. It's like it was so weird because you wouldn't expect a pick like that coming here. It's so strange, but it worked in so many levels for them. It was just fun to watch. Like they were doing a lot of stuff, and here we have the very first trade in the mid lane, which let me tell you, I didn't expect that it was going to go this way. Like that early double slash from the E and the ignite, I thought he was going to die right there, but the passive came through to save him. And after that, we saw this gank from the early Cossacks. At the time, Cossacks also brought ignite, so both of them were looking for early fights as often as they could.
No, totally. And let's just talk a little bit about how we use matchups because, of course, like the first thing we see is that Yasuo mid lane against the Yi, which can really caught your eye, like gets your attention. But then we see a kind of interesting lanes. For example, we do have an on Horus Harem side, we do have an Ezreal with, and she's a very dangerous you have the constant poking from Ezreal, the constant threat of Nami jumping you with the bubbles or with the hills, and they actually. Even though they were not like the main part of the game, as we're going to see that developed in the mid lane, they actually did a pretty good job keeping the lane occupied, keeping the lane like moving enough so that they were not getting any ganks from the enemy jungle, but at the same time they were not lacking when it came to farming or when it came to a different aspect of the team fights on the future.
Well, something that is important to say is the fact that Haruno, the ADC from Horus Harem, they are fantastic at being consistent. Like we've seen they pick Ezreal every single time, and with that character, they've been able to consistently take advantage of like the consistency, the poke, and Mighty Mrs. Bacon and Uwu. Both of them have done amazing jobs when it comes to how they fought every single match. Now, in the highlights, you can see that Master G was out for blood, the roams and everything. For a moment, it could have been a mistake and given a bunch of advantage towards the team, but attacks between in the jungle, like you saw from Kazakhs, was definitely what allowed and enabled Master G to fight, and also being mindful of your matches. Mordekaiser has a lot of 1v1 potential, and Kha'Zix didn't want to do anything with him. Like on 1v1 scenarios in the early game, he didn't want that. And you can see here that Master Yi was having like the time of his life. He was trying as often at pick out the Yasuo, even if it was between towers. And now you can see the second match between Mordekaiser and Master Yi, and Master Yi was just brushing him away with his little brushy sword that you can imagine. And here's what I was telling about seeing Harus Harem having like consistency in the bot lane. Like even the like look at Haruno, look at my name is Bacon. They're trying not only keep their distance, but at the same time, that's what they do. When mid lane finally roamed down to the bot lane, it was essentially over for them. What's important from Haruno is the fact that not only are they consistent, but they work together with their advantages. For example, you can see that My Name is Bacon was trying to be there for Master Yi. Like, yeah, you're not going to be able to stop him because I'm here. I'm also going to heal him back up. Like, and that's something that I think it's really important in games like this. They need to work to their advantages, and this is something that was present all throughout the match.
No, you're totally right. And I just want to like
Mm-hmm.
a little bit on the latest season that we are a lot of activity from supports roaming around the lanes, especially on mid lane. And it's just like you
Mm-hmm.
said, the Nami was on point to help out the Master Yi. Even though sometimes it looked like Master Yi didn't any help, the fact that the Nami was there to help him out, to get the heals, to get on point with every single attack he made in the team fights, or it was just a trade. That is very interesting because we are seeing a connection with the team, like a very good communication plan between all of the lanes. And you're totally right. Kha'Zix was just at the beginning again. He knew if I go against the Mordekaiser, I'm gonna suffer a little bit in comparison to my. So I have to I have to go to the lanes where I can get the biggest advantage. And the Kha'Zix had a really good game, but I just like it's like I said, it's not like last week's game in which the Kha'Zix was present all around the map. We saw a different development on Haru's behalf, and that tends to show us that they managed to change their attack plan on the go after the pick and
Mm-hmm.
ban, which is very good because usually you tend to stay to just one strategy because it works for you. In this case, they try to adapt to the picks and to the picks of the enemy team, and also to their what favors them as their champions. So totally in favor, like you said, in the development with Haru's team this past week.
Yeah, as we said before, teams are able to perform differently from one game to another. So it's really important to always like explore what can you to be better. There were lanes that were winning. You had Mordekaiser that had gotten a lot of advantage on top of Garen, and maybe if both either Mordekaiser tried to transplant some of his advantage towards Yasuo, maybe they could have like fought a little bit. But there was a problem here, and was the fact that there was no respect from Yasuo towards the Master Yi. Master Yi had a huge advantage, was taking advantage of the pick at the same time, and that definitely was something that they should have been a little bit more careful about. There are champions that just have the upper hand over other champions, and you need to be mindful of that kinds of stuff, and you need to know how to play passively against these kinds of characters. Wait for help. Master G doesn't have many escapes, and if you're healthy enough, you might be able to withstand him at least for the start of the game.
No, totally. Um, just making another here, like an analysis that I was thinking about. You are right. Whenever we're talking about Yasuo against the Master Yi, Yasuo tends to have the upper hand when it comes to lane because he has a better ability to start farming
Mm-hmm.
on lane. But we saw on the game how. So, for example, whenever you are playing with the Yasuo, you always think about the best combo you can develop, which is just stacking your Q to get to get your tornado. We are seeing how Master Yi was just calculating, how Per Alpha was just calculating every single Q from the Yasuo to take out one of his biggest advantages, which is his CC, which he can then connect with his ult. We saw how in many parts of the game the Yasuo was struggling to get his Q out because Master Yi has also an ability that basically kind of negates the CC, which is his alpha. His alpha strike just makes him invincible while dealing damage, and we saw how he took all the advantage from that into the game. It's actually very interesting to see how Master Yi didn't just rely on the Alpha Strike when it came to his traits. He actually started a lot of his traits with his E, empowering his auto attacks, then trying to take out his passive when he then creates a double strike, and then he will create his opening with the Alpha Strike to kind of get like the finishing blows.
Yes.
On the other hand, we saw as well how the Volibear from Cookie Crazy, specifically from Wasting, actually had a good amount of openings against the Master Yi. Volibear is a very good champion to try and just grapple you to the ground with his Q, trying to give you a lot of pressure. He actually made a really good amount of openings to attack the Yi. But then is when we go with the kinetic of Haru's team, how they knew that they needed to support their carry, and they did very, very well.
The thing is that they need to characters like this. What most important thing against an off pick like Master Yi as a whole in the mid lane, you need to take advantage of the fact that Master Yi doesn't have many escapes pre-6, and you need to, but they didn't. Like there's a character that you need to take care of that might become a huge pain for you later down the game, and if you don't take advantage of that kind of thing, you're definitely going to end up missing out. And Master Yi carried the whole match on his shoulders. Yeah, and everyone else was just consistent. Like you had Garen just being consistently pushing top and farming. You had Kha'Zix farming and fighting and getting objectives. At the end of the day, League of Legends is a game about consistency, and I think that we can jump to the second game right now to have a look at what we had to see.
And just to take some notes out of like this first match, we also have to recognize that Cookie Crazy did had a lot of good openings. I think the only problem was that they didn't follow up to the opening. They had pretty good openings. The Volibear was just getting his stuns on place, but then the rest of the team failed to follow up on that stun. Volibear, like a jungle Volibear, is a very interesting pick because he can enter in any fight, but as long as he has his team backing him up, he can create the damage, he can take care of ADC, he can take care of a lot of the spots on the fight as long as the team follows him up, and he had a pretty good team to follow up. He had a Jhin and also a Thresh on the bot lane. They are perfectly to keep you on place and to create a lot of damage whenever we talk about like those little scuttles that can happen on bot lane with some ganks. We also have a Mordekaiser that helps you create more CC to the ongoing CC you have. So you have CC to the second.
Yes.
And
then let's go over the second game. Cookie Crazy had a Kindred, and let me tell you, they were trying as much as they could in order to getting away from those close calls and the early presence of Kindred that was really important. But it's the fact that you can see that you cannot let it break your spirit. You had against Wyatt just going to town in the top lane, and they also set up with the Gwen, and you had a Seraph Orianna match in the mid lane, which is actually a really good match. Orianna was the best course of action against them, but the odd one out was against Dirtbike. Was using the Cillian as an ADC, and the carry role is so important. And it's definitely something else. And we're seeing Haruno, they're using Ezreal once again, which it's totally fine and such a good comfort pick. But you were seeing Siki bouncing back. The problem for them was definitely and Seraph, but there were like so many like small mistakes of them trying to get the Seraph that were so failing. They were not together. They were not reunited. And another thing that they did is that they didn't take into consideration or respected the Nocturne pick for that matter. Alpha was once again taking a huge advantage in the mid lane, and just top lane and jungle top lane and bot lane just needed to be consistent, and that's the name of the game for Haru's Harem. It's consistency. You can see here that Nocturne is just going in, and Seraph is raking in all the kills every single time. And even though bot lane and top are not necessarily, I don't know, going ahead, going in between towers and destroying the enemy team, what you're seeing essentially is that they're trying to just play consistently. And here you have like the Seraph in between towers. You're seeing Kindred that, of course, at this moment they're out of position, and Kindred was definitely the strongest link for CKC, and they should have worked together with Kindred. And but you would see like small skirmishes where either Nocturne or them had such a great presence, it was just so difficult for them to bounce back.
No, totally, and it's like you said, we do see how their pick, like CKC picks on the bot lane, actually just didn't help out whenever the Kindred was present on their lane. Because you're right, we do see how Kindred was getting like far ahead to the rest of his team. He was getting interesting kills around the match. But for example, whenever we saw skirmishes on the bot lane, there was a lack of something very important. We had a lack of damage that a carry would have helped out better if we picked that wasn't Cilia. Maybe they could have picked something more accustomed going to the Nautilus. The Nautilus is always a good pick whenever you're trying to help out your jungle to keep them as like stun in the CC to the ground. But
The
you
thing is
also
that
need a pretty good backup from the ADC.
Yeah, and I don't see like Cillian working really well. Like they needed that AD damage because just from Kindred was definitely not going to be enough, and that's a fact. Like even though Cillian had a reasonably good amount of CS, and he definitely carries the damage late game to work. Uh, I think they needed a little bit more. And another thing that is important is that the strongest link on Haru's Harem was definitely the Seraph. Why? Why did they stop giving him the priority of the game in general that he had in the early game? Imagine again this game where Seraph was not what was going to be as focused from Kindred and Oriana. Maybe they could have bounced back, but they definitely couldn't. Overall, I think CKC just needed to work about consistency and some of the picks, because CKC was one of the teams that actually lost to draft teams. Like they lost to draft. They lost to a variety of stuff, and that can happen. Like it can happen to all of us, but you definitely need to like be careful of your picks. Be careful of what you're doing, because you might end up losing the match due to a bad pick.
Totally, couldn't agree with you more. And even though, like you said, we can have some matches in which our game just don't help us out on the rest of the game, but even then, you have to adapt. And it's just like you said, you need consistency. Even if you have a pick, even if your picks are against you, you need to find an opening and to see if this can work for us. This is just the best course for us to win the match. We have to be consistent with it, and that is something that was lacking on the CKC side of the game. I could agree with you more over there. Maybe just like you said, maybe if the Kindred had a lot of prior to the mid lane, trying to get the Zeros as far behind as he possibly could, maybe we would have seen a very different outcome of the game.
and they had a really good start. They were getting picks in the bot lane. They were essentially trying to deny Serath of helping his team sometimes. Like, they were not doing bad. I think the thing they only needed to do is to have a little bit be a little bit more consistent, and I think communicating with themselves a little bit more. A problem that I definitely find was definitely the picks. That's the thing that I would work more towards. But now that with the CKC and Haru's Harem, we talk about Serenity. And Serenity had a rough time against Haru's Harem. We know that. That Nocturne, that Cossacks, they were insane. So how about we look at the second game and talk a little bit of how they performed against Team Sen? Shall we?
Shall we? We shall.
But as you said before, drafting is super important, and there needs to be a huge emphasis on team speaking. Like, if you have a big threat with a number on their head, you definitely need to take action. And here we have Serenity. Serenity picked a Zac, Gnar, Yone against Viego, Shen, Evelyn, and this is something that they needed to play. So an early invade from Serenity that landed a first blood on Kai'Sa was amazing. And if Kai'Sa would play her cards right and not get caught in the first 3 levels of the match, that was actually so worth it to flash at the start of the game.
Totally, you're totally right. And also very interesting to see, because at the beginning of the game you have to understand, especially we have heavy poking bot lanes. We have the Kai'Sa with the Karma, which is just constant poke, constant attacks against you if you're their enemy. But we also have Jhin that had actually pretty good in the beginning of the match, and we also had a Seraphine. And Seraphine is actually a pretty dangerous pick, have an ADC that can burst you out on the late game, because she can control, she can give you the CC, she can give you the damage, the shields and the heals at the same time,
or just the disengage. Like, it's so important. Another thing that you're going to see during these matches is the fact that they were playing the information game. Now, what do we say about it? Evelyn is a champion that has a lot of damage, can become definitely a threat during the match and everything. And the thing that they did is that they were playing the information game. They were getting deep wards into the jungle. They wanted to deny her as much as presence as they could, and you're definitely going to see it here. Yone had an early assist, would help Zac whenever he found it on the lanes. They got the first herald, but you're seeing here that Evelyn was trying to go ahead and go in and getting some lane ganks, getting a lot of pressure, and this is something that should have maintained itself during most of the match. Like, we're seeing this, and at this moment, definitely Team Sen was getting ahead, and that was actually really well played by them. And you're going to see the problem that is going to escalate a little bit later during the matches. Also, Yone getting the early advantage, getting a kill on them, wasting Shen's ult, and getting the early herald is huge for him. And this is going to be the first problem. The amazing guys over at ExpressVPN took a moment just to show us how amazing they are by appearing in front of our highlights. Very welcome. But the important thing is another thing about pathing. Even though Evelyn is stealth, you need to look into the problems that might happen. And with the open top and Shen trying to help the team as much as he could, he definitely stuck a little behind from the Gnar, allowing Gnar to get the first tower. And now, this skirmish that you can see right here could have been huge for Team Sen. They got a lot, but they overstepped. And with the teleport of Gnar and not peeling really well, the support and everything, they definitely fell a little bit back, especially if you see what is going to happen next. Not taking the Kai'Sa seriously in the early game was such a huge mistake, and they should have definitely tried their best to stick not only to that Kai'Sa, but to peel the backline, because Seraphine and Jean were definitely going to become some of the strongest points for them.
Yes, and I couldn't agree with you more. And like whenever you face a Kai'Sa, you know that it's going to be difficult to poke her to try and get the advantage when we go to the CS and the damage in the late game. But it still has to be your priority, because we have all seen the amount of damage and just suppression she can give to you on the mid game and then on the late game. So it's just like you said, they should give more priority to the Kai'Sa, and not exactly to just push her back on the game, but at least to like she keeps in line so the rest of the team can coexist on the match, especially if you do have a jungle, for example, that is constantly gonna keep you like alert. Whenever we're talking about an Evelyn, whenever you play against an Evelyn, you are always alert. You have to be always alert, and that actually helps your team, because you know the enemy bot lane, in this case the Kai'Sa and the Karma, had to be very wary of how much they push the lane, because in any moment there could be the invisible menace that can come out of the bush, and they can come out of the lane and then just strike and get the early kills.
Another thing that is really important, that I think you're going to agree with me, is the fact that you cannot overstep. Like sometimes if you see that there are many two people, and we saw like they were really they had really favorable fights that suddenly were lost by overstepping. And you can see it right here. You have, of course, you have Jean and Seraphine, but Jone is fed. Like, he does a lot of damage. He has his ultimate. Why would you go near him so casually against him? Like, you're asking for him to just engage you, because to you might think that you have the CC and the damage to contain him, but in the end, he's a fed Jone. So you need to be really careful about that.
No, yeah, I can completely agree with you, and we all know what happens when we get a fed Yone. We get an enemy that that is going to constantly be healing all the damage you have done to him on the lane. We have an enemy that can come in and come out. His disengage for every battle is just huge. And then the amount of support he can give to the rest of the team, not only in damage, but just beginning every single fight, is huge. And that is something that you have to take a lot of good care on. And that's when we get, like you mentioned before, the missteps. We get the oversteps from Team Sen, who could have controlled a lot of the fights. They just didn't found the right tempo and the right openings for each battle.
Yes. We also see like some matches that some fights that were just not winnable, or that they just fought without the whole team. Like, you could see it in the fight between that we just saw, that was Jone against Seraphine, Evelyn, and everyone else. Like, sometimes you should, at this moment, of course it's too late, but you were seeing this kind of ballsiness from the team. Like, they were trying to overstep, in the sense that they wanted to grab their lead a little bit further, but that definitely backfired in more situations than not. You need to be careful at the same time when it means to how you're fighting, who you're fighting, and especially the surroundings. That fight in the dragon on the red tree bush was definitely a huge moment of the game that could have gave them a bouncing back, but they really couldn't. And overall, both teams actually played really well the early game. The mid game is always a crapshoot, and it's so difficult to fight. So I think that they needed to play their cards a little better, and they needed to support the Evelyn on what she was doing, because definitely Serenity had a lot of information of where she was going, and everything, and that really gave them a small problem.
No, totally agree with you. And not only that, but Team Sen did manage to start creating that Jhin on the late game that just destroys you with a Q or maybe just two shots. If they would have just given also a lot of priority to help out either the Evelyn or the Jean when we come to the team fights, maybe we would have a different outcome. But it's just like you
Yes.
said, they had like Serenity had a lot of information. They knew how the enemy team was moving, and that is just a key concept in every match in League of Legends. If you have information, just like GI Joe said, you have won't have the battle.
Yes. Now we can jump into the next highlight. We're just reminding like Evelyn, and while we check in the screens, we can see that Evelyn actually had a lot of really good early ganks. So the problem wasn't definitely her. It could have been a little bit different. Now Team Sen for this match, they got the sack for themselves, and they went in the mid lane with Seraph. Now Seraph is a character that we've seen during this match, but Serenity went for the Cassadin, and Cassadin is such a nice pick against Ezreal, against Seraph, because he's actually really good. And we're seeing another poke bot lane with Seraphine in this time with Serenity and Ezreal in the poke lane. And we're seeing that they picked again the comfort pick Jin. And just look at the early fight between Bolivar and Garen. And Garen picked Ignite for this match. So
Very
and
interesting.
Garen not taking advantage of that Ignite early game and losing the first blood to Bolivar essentially escalated the game into something that is just not from Christ. And you're seeing that clickbait, the Bolivar was getting like insane kills, and this is the thing that we were telling before about overstepping, that they should have like read the map and the fights in general. And you're seeing like a lot of pressure from Bolivar in the bot lane. You sack, you were seeing Sejuani coming over in many places, and this is definitely something. And this is something that happened to Serenity too, and it's a fact of overstepping, like not taking like into consideration what's happening or where the enemy's located is something that definitely can throw you off many times. This catch up in the
No,
jungle was really good from Serenity. Cassadin getting those early kills for Cassadin are huge, and on level 6, oof, that's just what you want from that. The thing is that Zac is such a good champion to get like early ganks or anything, that I think the effort that went to the top lane, which was really difficult for him to bounce back, would have gone way better in the mid lane before Cassadin gets his flash. And well, Siggy in the bot lane as Ezreal having a hard of a hell time against Seraph and Zac. But here, this is what I'm telling you: overstepping. Seraph doesn't have mana. Zac is not necessarily in a really good position. Seraphine has all her health. When Cassadin roamed like naturally, he was going to get a lot from it, and that's definitely what's some decisions that set behind Team Sen a lot.
no, I completely agree with you. And just going over the prospects and also how the highlights moving. It's very interesting to see how both teams are quite different, but how they can rely on their own strengths. For example, I think that for this match specifically, Team Sense Christ, which was the Jean, the ADC from Team Sen, didn't perform as well as he was doing on his previous match, because we saw, even though that he was going against a heavy poking bot, we saw how he got the upper hand when we got to the CS. And he actually has a support from the Nami, which is very crucial, because Nami is a pick that will not only keep you healthy, but it will keep you secure. Nami can secure enemy teammates with her bubble. She can actually help a lot in putting some damage and just giving you the support you need whenever we go to the trades. But I think they were not communicating as well as they could have, especially of how Zac can play a big role. Just like you said, he can play a big role when we go to the early ganks. And if you add that up, a Jin that just outputs a lot of damage, and a Nami that can keep both of them healthy for the rest of those scuttles on the bot lane, that could have gone differently. That just could have been a nightmare for the Ezreal and for the Seraphine to deal with. But
Yes.
also, it's very important to see how the Volibear just went on ahead with a very, very aggressive early game. And that is actually a very interesting way of seeing Volibear, because we have seen how Volibear can play a very secure lane. But if you play him right, especially on the aggressive side, the amount of damage
look at this.
you
Look
can
at this
do.
fight in the mid lane. Just like you're saying, like he went like so violent, so aggressive, and just being able to leave out anything that they were trying to do, like, and game to him, and not allowing him to just escalate that into other lanes was definitely a send off for the rest of the team. And we're not saying that, and the picks were really solid for both teams. They're definitely props to them to actually playing the game and playing to their advantages. As we've said before, overstepping in every direction is definitely the worst enemy of these two teams, because you're seeing it not only for Blitzy, that a couple of times he definitely got caught, but there were really good moments where the team Serenity were located in really good places. Like they were where they're supposed to be at most of the given moments.
No, totally. And I gotta agree with you on this one, that the picks were actually pretty strong for the team composition they both had. They actually were showing on the early game a pretty interesting future fights that could have held on if we could have taken into account overstepping. If we would have taken into account also the continuity you have to give whenever you begin a fight. Because, for example, whenever you can turn out to have those matches in which a Volibear can go all out with aggressiveness, but then the Garen, he can get out of fights, or he can keep up the fight and then come back up because of his passive allows him to heal up and then just go back to the fight without going back to the base. And we at the beginning, you think this is gonna be a very aggressive Garen because of just what we mentioned before. He took Ignite. So whenever I see a Garen with Ignite, the first thing I think is, at the first moment I get a chance to get to the volley, I have to get to the volley at least at level 3. I have to get an all hands down attack against him, put in the Ignite, the Q, the E on the just pursue him to his tower, because that would help me in 2 ways. The first, he will take his potions early game, so he will not have a lot of sustain during the fight, and also I can get a lot more advantage when it comes to farming. That's what was missing with Team Sense Garen. Volley was being very aggressive. The Garen should have been double as aggressive as the Volley, because in the long run, if he played it right, he could have outmatched the Volley, trying to cancel some of his abilities correctly. Maybe at least the shield we get from his Thunder. But it's also worth mentioning that the picks on this match were looking very, very different, and that is very interesting to see. That they actually, like Team Sen, actually wanted to replan their own, like the whole game plan they had from previous matches to match up with Haru. If they would have just
being themselves,
exactly. If they would just develop all the team fights, if they would have been better with a lot of their communications, this could have been a totally fight. We could have even seen. Even Cassidy, that we know how Cassidy gets when he gets his level 6, he could have had a very hard time if we had a very fed Garen, or at least a Garen that had some wins, a gag that was just on point with every gang. I think that would have been a very outcome to the fight.
Yes. One thing that we're going to definitely tell you guys that is really amazing is ExpressVPN, one of the most trusted VPN services around the whole internet. If you ever want to access to geo restricted data, you can definitely do it with the help of VPN. Also, gaming with a VPN is highly recommendable because they protect you to many other threats from people that are not very likable. So be sure to check out ExpressVPN, a proud sponsor of EHE, and also check out EHE Esports for many more content on esports forever and ever. And also, I want to give thanks to the guys over at the creative team for allowing me to edit those highlights that hopefully you liked. And if not, I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
They're pretty awesome highlights. And just before we go, we have to remember that we are on week 3 of the Starcaster tournament. We want to just give a quick rundown of the schedule we have announced for this week. Tomorrow, Wednesday the 30th, we have Team Sen against Haru's Harem, and then Thursday, 1st of July, we have Haru's Harem versus Serenity Esports Red Panda. We do have to make an announcement. From now on, we won't be seeing CKC as they step down from the tournament. We're gonna miss them deeply, and we hope that we can see them in future Starcasters, or hopefully in a future Moonstone. But for now, stay tuned because we have very exciting fights this week. And before we go, I have to ask you, Steph, which of these 2 matches are you looking for the most? I do have my answer.
I really want to see more of Haru's Harem. Haruno, Wyatt, Pure Alpha, like, they are monsters. And I want to see what they can cook up for later matches. And when it comes to Serenity, I want to see what Serenity really learned from their mistakes against when they rematch Haru's Harem, because they're definitely a team that is putting, like, it's raising the bar when it comes to fight.
Well, actually, you picked one of my answers because I do have 2 answers. First of all, I do want to see the rematch between Haru's Harem and Serenity. I think that Serenity hold of a lot of good strategies they can bring against Haru's Harem. That is going to be a very interesting matchup. But I also want to see how Team Sen can learn from this week's matches against Serenity and bring back the energy at on week 1, especially with their picks and their strategies through the whole game. Because I want to see the unexpected matches and fights we got from Team Sen on week 1 against Haru's Harem. I want to see if they can manage to disrupt the team composition, the team communication they are going through the whole event. Those are the 2 matches. Like, I'm really excited for this week's matches, and well, for the rest of the matches of the Starcaster tournament. But we are running short of time. First of all, we do want to thank our amazing producer Cynthia. Thank you very much for being here with us. As always, I also want to thank Steph for accompanying me. Actually, well, he is going to be casting on this week, so do not miss it because we do have amazing talent working on this tournament. For example, tomorrow we do have Rich Red and Airborne G2, which are 2 amazing casters, amazing talent. And thank you all for not only participating in Starcaster, for seeing. We hope to bring you more amazing moments. Don't forget to tune in to the next Caster Talk. Next is going to be every Tuesday until the end of the event. And with nothing else to say, I want to say good night. Steph, thank you so much for being here. You're awesome. All awesome. Everybody's here is awesome. You are awesome. You are awesome. I Reeves, that's it. On his presentation.
You are breathtaking.
No, you are breathtaking.
See you guys
very
soon. And welcome. And we want to see you back here at Starcaster.
Until later. Good night.